And we are going to get started. It's 10:01 and we might have some more people joining us. Just want to remind everyone we are recording the webinar. So for folks who weren't able to attend live, we will be able to get this out to them afterwards. So my name is Margaret Joyce. I am the president of the Greater Dover Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined this morning by my colleagues, Allison St. Laurent in the Falls Chamber of Commerce, and also Laura Ring in the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. And then we have our two Zoom specialists working behind the scenes. Kaylin Bamford from the Greater Rochester Chamber is here, and Melissa Launder from the Dover Chamber is also behind the scenes. So any of you watching, if you have any issues, technically just put that in the chat. Kaylin can probably take care of any technical issues that you might have. So just put something in the chat. We are going to do Q&A at the end of this, not during. Would like to get through the PowerPoint first, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. We decided this morning we're just going to use the chat function as opposed to the Q&A, because what we found in a lot of these webinars, people put it in the chat anyway. And what we're going to do is read the questions aloud for our panelists, and then they will answer your questions. So we're going to start again with the PowerPoint, and then we will have any questions. We will have time to address them afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, we are recording this webinar. We are pleased to have with us this morning two representatives from the New Hampshire SBA office. We have Miguel Morales, who is an economic development specialist and veterans business development specialist with us this morning. Thank you, Miguel. And we also have Rachel Roderick, who is the Deputy District Director of the SBA office here in New Hampshire. Thank you both for joining us. I'm going to turn my camera off and turn it over to you folks and learn right along with you.
Okay. So thank you. Hopefully you can all see my presentation now. Get a thumbs up from Miguel so I can make sure that it's up there. Awesome, thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Roderick. I'm the Deputy District Director for the SBA in New Hampshire. Miguel Morales is our Economic Development Specialist and covers many counties for us, including the counties that we're talking with today. So I want to thank, first of all, the Tri-Chambers for having us today. We really appreciate these partnerships and being able to get on and speak with the memberships of the chambers directly so that we can make sure everyone is aware of the assistance being offered now, and also we can answer any specific questions as we go forward. So I'm going to cover the beginning part of the presentation and then have Miguel jump in later on. But first of all, I just wanted to give you the most important website here to talk that will cover in detail everything that we're talking about today. You can find on sba.gov/relief. So that will give you any details, forms, guidance, etc. that you need on any of these programs. This first slide just gives you a snapshot of all of the assistance currently being offered through the SBA. First of all, the SBA is a federal agency, so we are in Concord, but we have SBA offices located around the country. We are implementing all of this disaster relief program that started with the CARES Act and then was further refined with the Economic Aid Act and all of the other current legislation that's being passed for stimulus and economic relief. It all has also programs for the SBA. The most important one that most businesses are aware of is the Paycheck Protection Program. We are currently at about 70% through our funding at this point. Across the whole country, we did over 3 million applications in this program in 2021. In New Hampshire, we are at almost 12,000 loans for another $978 million. Just to give you an idea, in 2020, just in New Hampshire, we did 25,000 of these paycheck protection loans. So these loans are meant to be help businesses with their payroll expenses and kind of give them some relief to get through a couple of months of payroll so that they can get some assistance that way. It's also really important to note here that it covers Schedule C filers, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail because there's been a recent change there. So really anyone that has self-employment income as an independent contractor, you don't have to have employees to apply for this program. So we want to make sure people understand that because we are trying to reach the smaller businesses this time around. Right now, that program is scheduled to expire on March 31st. We're hoping for an extension to that. It has passed Congress. We're expecting it to get an extension any day now. As soon as the president signs it, that will go into effect. The next program here is just kind of a for your awareness program. This is a debt relief. So anyone that has a current SBA loan that's in our portfolio, and all of our loans go through lenders. So your loan would be with the lender, but if it's backed by an SBA guarantee, the SBA has been making payments on your behalf to the lender. So these are payments that are forgiven. They don't have to be paid back. So it's another, assistance that's being offered to help people with those monthly obligations that they have. The direct loan program that SBA does have is through our Office of Disaster Assistance. So it's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And this is a loan that is meant to provide operating capital to businesses. So a recent change here changed the formula. So SBA determines the loan amounts that people are eligible for. We were basing it on 6 months of operating expenses. It's now been bumped up to 24 months of operating expenses. So businesses are eligible for a lot larger loans under this program. And this is a fixed interest rate loan. We give a 30-year maturity so that the monthly payment is super low. It's at a fixed interest rate of 3.75 for small businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits. So it's really inexpensive money for businesses, and it has long deferment periods of at least 18 months, sometimes 24, depending on when you receive the loan. So just something to look at if you need additional capital for your business. We are also rolling out a grant program for shuttered venues. So this is for live performance businesses, so people that have, typically have live performances in their operations. It also covers movie theaters, museums, those types of businesses. There is a webinar tomorrow that talks about the application process that we can get information to if people are interested. And that program is scheduled to open for applications on April 8th. You can apply for both the PPP and the shuttered venue. Just need to make sure you apply for the Paycheck Protection Program before that one. So I'm going to get a little bit more in detail on the Paycheck Protection Program. So with the Economic Aid Act, the program reopened and people are eligible for what's called either a first draw or a second draw loan under this program. So in order to get the first draw loan, that means you did not receive a loan in 2020 under this program. So for a few reasons, people may not have been eligible. There was additional entities that are now eligible, but also Schedule C filers may not have applied in 2020 because of the way the loan was calculated at that point. And we're going to talk about how it's calculated differently, which makes it more advantageous for those businesses. They also increased some other eligible expenses that can be used. So it does have to still be used for 60% payroll expenses, but for some of those other non-payroll expenses, they expanded it to include things like PPE for your employees, if you have any. Also, if you had to make any renovations or accommodations in your business because of COVID, a lot of people had to put up plexiglass or had outdoor dining. All of those expenses would now be eligible for forgiveness under this loan for that 40% that you can use for that. You do have a covered period. So what happens is once you receive the funds from the program, you have anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks to spend the money on those eligible expenses before you can apply for forgiveness. This is for businesses that have been in operation before February 15th of 2020. So it's not for new businesses, but it's meant for businesses that were in place when the COVID hit the country. Right now, as I said, this has a deadline of March 31st, 2021. We are expecting an extension to this program. We're just waiting for that legislation to be signed. So some of the new eligibility entities that are now eligible includes housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations. Most of our chambers of commerce in the state are now eligible, and also some news organizations are eligible. On the bottom, you'll see these entities down here have always been eligible. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, basically anyone with self-employment income. All business entities, whether you're a partnership, an LLC, a corporation, and most nonprofit organizations are now eligible. But we always had the 501c3s that were eligible and certain other veteran organizations. So the second draw loan is basically for people that did receive the first PPP loan in 2020 and use those eligible expenses. So you need to certify that you received the loan and you already ended your covered period and used the loan proceeds under that first loan. If that's the case, and you also can show that you had at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts, you are eligible to apply for a second loan under the program. It is calculated the same way that it was the last time, which is you come up with your average monthly payroll costs, and this can be based on either your self-employment income or your actual payroll costs if you have W-2 employees. You figure out what your monthly cost is and you times it by 2.5. So it basically gives you 2.5 months of your payroll expenses. Up to the $2 million is where they're capping the loan at this point. You can either use your 2019 or your 2020 payroll costs to come up with this. And when you're trying to figure out whether you had a 25% reduction in revenues, you can either compare your annual revenues for 2019 as compared to 2020, or you can do a quarter to quarter comparison. So quarter one of 2019 to quarter one of 2020. And do that for each of the quarters. And as long as you received a 25% reduction in any one quarter, you are eligible for the program. For those of you that are in the accommodations or the food sector, so you would have to have the NAICS code or the industry code 72 on your tax return. If you are in that industry, the loan amount allows you to take that average monthly payroll and times it by 3.5 instead of 2.5. So basically it's giving you an extra month of payroll expenses for that loan. All of these loans, the PP loans, are all done through our participating lenders. So we give our lenders delegated authority to make these loans. So that's how you would apply to them. And just have to supply them with your documentation. Just want to dive a little bit closer into the Schedule C filers because this change just came about on March 5th of this year. So things are constantly changing with these programs, and every day it seems like, Miguel can testify to this, that every day we are just getting tweaks to these programs and new information. So this is the latest on the Schedule C filers, which makes it a lot more attractive for people to apply for the program. You cannot, they have not made it retroactive, so we can't go back and change loans that were already dispersed or reported to the SBA, but for any new loans approved on or before, on or after March 5th of 2021, this new calculation comes into play. And it's it's a game changer for a lot of Schedule C filers. So before this change, the way that the loan was calculated to determine what your owner's compensation was that it only allowed you to take the net profit. So if you look at your Schedule C, you find your net profit on line 31, and that's basically your revenues after all of your eligible business expenses. This change now allows you to jump all the way up to the top of the form and take your gross income as your self-employment income. So it's a lot larger number for most people. So if you are if you have your Schedule C and you're a self-employed individual with no employees, basically you're going to look to line 7, which is your gross income, and that is what your owner's compensation is. So to determine your loan amount, you would take your gross income, you divide it by 12 to come up with your average monthly income, and then you take that number times the 2.5. This allows for people that may have had a net loss to now be eligible, because now you're looking at your gross income versus your net. Also, it allows for people that may have very small net profits to now be eligible for a much larger loan amount. For example, an owner, the maximum loan that an owner can have for self-employment income that has no employees is now $20,833. They do cap it at $100,000 for the annual amount. So just to keep that in mind, if your line 7 is over 100,000, you'd need to cap that at $100,000 to come up with your loan amount. But it allows for a much larger loan for most people. If you do have employees, you can still opt in to use the gross income for your owner's compensation, but the calculation is a little bit different. So you would take your gross income, you take out your employee expenses, which you'll find on those line 14, 19, and 26. That gives you your owner's compensation, and then you can look to your employee costs and add those back in. So most people will use the 941 where you report your employees. You can also add in any employer paid benefits to that number. And then you would take your owner's compensation and all your employee related costs to come up with your total payroll costs, and then do the calculation based on what you're, divided by 12 to get your monthly number, and then times it by either the 2.5 if you're in any other industry besides food and accommodations, or 3.5 if you are in the food and accommodation sector. So basically the change is really only affecting your owner's compensation, just to make sure that's clear. The law, since that change, they are requiring anybody that's using gross income, if that number is over 150,000, you do want to make sure that in your file you're keeping some documentation that shows why your business was adversely affected because of the virus. So you don't have to necessarily supply that information, but anyone that's in that pool of loans where you're using the gross and it's over the 150, you are in a pool that may be subject to review. So we just want to make sure people understand that you want to make sure that you're keeping documentation that supports that in case you ever do get picked for a review. If your gross income is under $150,000, you are safe harbored, which basically means you are not subject to review. So you don't have to worry about that. Also, if you're going for the second draw loan, it's assumed that you are adversely affected because you have to show that 25% reduction in revenues. So you don't really necessarily have to have additional documentation for that. So after looking at the Schedule C, if you decide, this is something that you want to pursue, basically you have to work with the lender. So your first step is to find a PPP lender, which is pretty easy considering most lenders in the state and around the country do work with SBA quite regularly. So usually the path of least resistance is to find the lender that you normally work with, that you have a relationship with. So hopefully as a business owner, you have that existing relationship. If you don't have that, or your lender for some reason is not participating, you can either go to a program called Lender Match, which is at sba.gov/lender match, or you can go to our New Hampshire website, which Miguel will show you how to get to later on, and you can find a list of our New Hampshire participating lenders. But like I said, most lenders that are doing commercial lending in the state are participating lenders with SBA. So that's usually pretty easy to find. The next step would be to complete the application with your lender. So For most lenders, we're seeing that even though SBA has certain forms that we have, put out there for our lenders and borrowers to use for this program, most of the banks and the lenders have opted to do an electronic application. So they have it right on their website. So you would go to their website, you would plug in your information and apply right online. It will require you to submit some supporting documentation. So for example, if you're self-employed, it will ask you to put your copy of your Schedule C tax return up there. It will also ask you to put a copy of your license, because they want to make sure that you're who you say you are. And then it usually will ask for some kind of documentation that shows that you were in business as of that February 15th date. So whether it's a lease agreement or a copy of a bank statement, anything that shows that you were operating a business before that February 15th deadline. Once you submit all that information to the bank or the lender, they will apply electronically to the SBA, and the SBA within a couple of days usually will get the approval back to the lender. So we are doing a little bit more vetting. Typically under our delegated program, when the bank submits the application, they get an answer from SBA instantaneously. There's a little bit of a delay right now because we're making sure with all of these loans that we're doing that we're making loans that are eligible, and also trying to reduce fraud. So we are doing some checks and balances before we issue that loan amount, or that loan approval. So just a heads up, but within a couple of days, the lender should have an answer back from the SBA, and then they would work with you to have you sign things. Usually it's through DocuSign, where you would do the closing of the loan and provide your banking information and that type of stuff to receive the funds. So these loans are designed to be forgiven. So SBA has forgiven a bunch of these loans that were made in 2020. Over 99% of them have been forgiven. So just to understand that as long as you're using the money as you agreed, chances are your loan will be 100% forgiven. There were some updates based on the Economic Aid Act that made the process even more favorable for businesses. So for those of you that may have taken advantage of the direct loan from SBA, the EIDL, and received an advance, which was given out in the very beginning, before this Aid Act was passed, that advance amount was going to be deducted from the forgiveness amount. So that has been corrected and it will no longer happen. The IRS also released some guidance that if the funds are being used from the PPP loan, those expenses that you use for that are also now tax deductible, which was a fix that they made from the CARES Act. And the SBA significantly simplified the process for forgiveness for the loans up to $150,000. Which is almost 90% of the loans being made under this program. So those were all really favorable changes made under the Economic Aid Act, basically correcting a couple of the nuances of the program that was created under the CARES Act. And then always was the case that once your PPP loan is forgiven, that amount that you get forgiven is not taxable income on your federal taxes. In the rare case that any of your proceeds do not get 100% forgiven, it does turn into a loan. So it would be a 1% loan with no collateral or personal guarantees, no penalties for prepayment, and a 5-year maturity. But like I said, the majority of these will be 100% forgiven. But in some cases, if the business was not able to use it for 60% of their payroll or whatever reason, they don't get complete forgiveness, those parameters are in place to create a pretty favorable loan to pay that back. Let's switch gears a little bit to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So this is the direct loan that's available through the SBA. It has been extended to December 31st. A couple of things that were just announced on this program is the way that the loan is calculated. So this again, SBA determines the loan amount for these loans, and they were basing it on 6 months of operating expenses when it first rolled out. We never really anticipated that we were still going to be dealing with COVID over a year later. So originally they were giving businesses 6 months of operating expenses and hoping that was going to bridge the gap to get people back to normal again. As we all know, things did not happen as we had hoped, and we are now, in this over a year. So they've revisited the way they calculate the loan amount, and they're now basing it on 24 months of operating expenses. So people would be eligible for a lot larger loan under this program. And these loans are basically being able to be used for anything you would be paying monthly. So whether it's rent, utilities, any fixed debt payments that you may have, any payroll that you're not already using the PPP loan for, any of those regular monthly expenses that you have, you can use these proceeds for. It is a fixed interest rate, 3.75 for businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits. The agency automatically gives you a 30-year term. So just to make that monthly payment as low as possible. There's no payment, no penalties for prepayment, no collateral up to $25,000 on these. Over $25,000, they take a business lien on any business assets. They currently, like I said, are making these loans larger. They also increase the cap. We were capped at $150,000. They now increase that to a $500,000 cap. If the loan does go over $200,000, they do require a personal guarantee, but under that they do not. So it's a really inexpensive way to get working capital for your business if you can use it. For those of you that may have already got the loan before this change in the way they calculate it, you will be reached out by the SBA and to see if you would be interested in an increase. So those will be rolling out soon, so that you'll be able to opt into that if you do need additional funds. And these are available to, again, small businesses with less than 500 employees, private nonprofits, and other co-ops and agricultural enterprises. So I mentioned the EIDL advance early on when I was talking about how that's no longer going to be deducted from forgiveness. So we ran out of those funds pretty rapidly. They did replenish the well, so to speak, on the EIDL advance, but they are targeting the way that those funds are being used. So what they've decided to do is to go back to anyone that applied for the EIDL loan before December 27th of 2020. And if you received less than the $10,000 advance, or you received zero advance because the loan that had already run out of funding, they're going to give you the option of applying for up to the $10,000. So you do have to, you'll get an email invite, so it's nothing that you can apply for directly. Once you get the email invite, there's a way to check to see if you're in a low-income community. So you have to be in a low-income community and also have shown at least a 30% loss in revenues over an 8-week period. If you can do those two things, you would be eligible for the full $10,000. So if you received money in the past, but not up to the $10,000, they'll give you the difference. And if you didn't receive any and you qualify, you would get the full $10,000 under that program. So look for an email if you are an EIDL borrower and applied before that December 27th deadline. For the Shuttered venue, so this is a program that's a grant program that SBA is rolling out. It is for those businesses that have live performers that perform. Also for motion picture, movie theaters, museums, zoos, aquariums, or people that represent talent. Any of those types of entities that have been in business before February 29th of 2020 would be eligible to apply for this program. And basically, there's a webinar that's going to be rolling out tomorrow afternoon that will go over how to apply. They are going to open the application April 8th for people to apply. So originally, people weren't going to be able to do the PPP program and shuttered venues. They did lift that restriction, so you can still apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. And then down the road, if you do receive a shuttered venue grant, they would just deduct your PPP loan amount from that, your eligible grant. So stay tuned for more information rolling out about that. And if you are in any of these eligible entities, we strongly encourage you to take advantage of that webinar tomorrow, and we can get you that information if you do need it. Talked about the debt relief program. So basically, if you have an existing SBA loan through any of our programs, including our microloan program, our 504 program, which finances a lot of real estate transactions in the state, or any of our 7A programs, SBA Express loans, and any of those, you did receive 6 months of payments in 2020, and depending on when your loan was approved, you'll be receiving additional principal and interest payments from the SBA. Those, we work with our lenders to, get those paid and reported and all that. There's nothing really you need to do as a borrower other than, just be aware that you don't have to make those payments, and SBA will be making them. And we're not deferring those payments down the road. We're actually paying them, and they will not have to be paid back. And then for anything new that you may have, so any credit that would be new, whether you need a line of credit, or you need to buy a new piece of equipment, or anything really for business related, we are having a sale on our regular loan program. So all of our fees have been waived for the whole fiscal year through September 30th of 2021, which is usually a really big deal. Doesn't happen very often, but it's kind of on the back burner because we have all of this disaster relief programs out there. But if you are in need of new financing, it's a really good deal to have no guarantee fees on SBA loans. Also, the SBA will be making the first 3 monthly payments on all new loans approved after February 1st of 2021. So those are your first 3 payments SBA makes on your behalf to the lender that you do not have to pay back. So pretty good incentive if you do need that additional financing. And in order to make it more attractive for our lenders, because we need them to make SBA loans, because we don't do the loans ourselves, we do them through lenders, we're offering all of our lenders 90% guarantees on our 7A loans. We're allowing them to use the most favorable program we have called the SBA Express for our loans up to $1 million, and giving them a bump in the guarantee on the smaller loans under that program. So typically those have a 50% guarantee. We're giving them a 75% guarantee on the loans up to $350,000. All of these have to go through our lender. So like I was saying before, on the PPP side, you can find our regular lenders the same way because they're the same people. So just a couple takeaways here. Paycheck Protection Program, right now we're looking at a March 31st deadline. We're hoping that's going to be extended and expecting that to happen really any minute now. If you are in that situation where you file a Schedule C, definitely something to look at now, because it really is a game changer on how you calculate that loan amount. Debt relief, we already talked about. The economic injury disaster loan, just to reiterate that you only can have one application. So if you already applied under this COVID disaster, you can't reapply, but look for an invitation for an increase, because they have changed the way they calculate that loan. And if you did not apply yet and can use that operating capital, it is a very inexpensive way to get capital for your business, and that can help with those monthly obligations. Shuttered venue, if you're in any of those eligible entities, reach out to Miguel or myself, and we will get you the information for the webinar tomorrow. And that one opens up on April 8th. Lots of dates to juggle with all of this. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Miguel, and he's gonna tell you about our resource partners.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay. So these are resource partners. A lot of you probably already quite know them pretty well. We have SCORE. They cover the whole state of New Hampshire. They're volunteers. They do not get paid for this at all. A lot of them are business owners. So they've been through the whole 9 yards of starting businesses and, failing them and starting back up again. But they do free one-on-one counseling and mentoring for the lifetime of your business. Then we have the Center for Women in Enterprise. You do not have to be a woman to order to utilize them. You could, anyone could take advantage of them. The reason why the Center for Women in Enterprise, women business centers were open up is to help women businesses to play with the leveling field out there with the competitions. We also have the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center. You're all probably familiar with them. The business advisors, the certified business advisors, they also provide one-on-one counseling and mentoring. And again, they're free for the lifetime of your business. So you wouldn't have to just use one. You could use all three of them to get advice. Everything's always confidential. They work with each other too. So the resource partners work with each other. They put on a lot of workshops. Right now, everything's done online. I'll go over that, how to get all that information. The bottom one that you see there is the VBOC, it's the Veterans Business Outreach Center. They're actually located out of Rhode Island. They cover the whole New England area. So to help veterans and their spouses to, whether it's starting, thinking, or expanding their business, so they can actually help them with them. I'm also the Veterans Business Officer for the state of New Hampshire for the SBA, so I help a lot of veterans and women spouses to start their business. And I also put on a 2-day workshop. It's usually done at the Naval Shipyard or Pease Air Force Base, but everything's been on virtual from now on. It's a 2-day program. Is basically getting started, what you're dealing with, how to deal with your customers and dealing with your clients, your competition. The main thing that we push for 2 days straight is research. You got to do your research. It's got to help you. Business financials, business plans. Then from there, they get a certificate, but it helps them out. Rachel, do you want to go on the next slide there? This should be a next slide. Okay, so this is our link, sba.gov/NH. You're going to find all kinds of great information on there. When you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see events. It's all our resource partners, including the SBA, of workshops that we're putting on. So take advantage of it. Every Wednesday, we're doing Wednesday webinars. We're updating everyone on the PPP, the EIDL loan, the Shuttered grant venue. So things are constantly changing. So take advantage of that. Tuesday talks, we have that, I believe, that once a month on different topics. So take advantage on that. But those workshops, take advantage of it. We also do have a Twitter account, as you can see, at SBA_NH. Our email address is New Hampshire, one word, _DO@SBA.gov. And again, when you're on that website, all the way down to the bottom right, you'll see email updates. Sign up for those updates. You're going to constantly get emails of what's going on, what's being changed through SBA. We also put some state information on there, what cities and towns, what's going on to them to help the small businesses. This is our number, 603-225-1400. It's our main line, so we do answer that. And as Rachel was saying, sba.gov/relief, you're going to gain access to all that. We were talking about lenders earlier. I see we do have a lenders list on our website. Go on there. It's 2020 lenders list, I believe. And I see a lot of people that actually go online and find lenders that you do work online instead of in person. Differences between sitting with a commercial loan officer and doing this someone online, you're not going to get the answers that you're going to need right away. So if you actually deal with your community lending institute, your community banks, credit unions, national banks, they're the ones that are going to give you answers a lot quicker than dealing with a lending institute that's online. So I've been seeing quite a few problems with that. ODA offers the disaster assistance where you see the economic injury disaster relief. They've been around for years. They also deal with fire, ice storms, economic injury disaster storms. We also deal with military economic disaster on that too. So if you got a veteran that's an essential for your business, he or she gets called overseas, we could actually help you get someone trained to keep that business running, operational. But we're also going to need a letter stating that he or she comes back, they're going to have that job back or something better than that. So Office the disaster assistance been around for a long time. So we've been dealing again. So anything that happens, any fires, ice storms, or anything like that, it's done through the President of the United States or our administrator from DC. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
And I just want to double down on Miguel's saying that our resource partners, you don't have to choose one or the other. We always get that question in our office. And I always, and all of our staff does as well, encourage people to know that all of the resources that cover your area and to reach out to all of them, because everyone brings their own personal experiences to the table, and they may all have different, ideas about how you can grow, expand, or, navigate some of these programs. So, maybe have one main advisor, but also reach out to them as well, because they all have different training programs that are being offered, and you don't have to, only do one. And all of those resources are offered to you without charge. So definitely something to take advantage of, and can certainly help you as a small business owner. You're kind of isolated a lot of times, and it's great that you're all members of the chamber, because I think that provides you also with that network. It's really important for businesses, but also that technical assistance is really important to get that independent voice to help you through some challenges as business owners. So I think that's all that we had. We're gonna open it up, I know, to some questions, so we'll stay tuned for that.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel and Miguel. Certainly some great information that you've been providing, and all the resources that are available. The information continues to change, and there's going to be, hopefully some more extensions. So we appreciate all the information you provide to the chambers as well. For those that are out there, if you want to submit your questions in the chat, please do so now. We do have a couple of questions out there. From the Greater Dover Chamber of Commerce, the question is, if you want to do a PPP second draw, how do you demonstrate that the initial PPP funds have been expended, and what documentation is needed? So I'll let Rachel and/or Miguel decide who will speak on that, or both.
Sure, I can take that. So basically, you just have to certify that you spent your funds. So it has to be at least 8 weeks from the time you got your funds, because that's the minimum covered period. But you have to have enough expenses that covers your loan amount. So you want to make sure that you are at least, it has to be at least 60% of your payroll expenses, and then you can use the other for some, rent and utilities and those other eligible expenses. But you just want to make sure that you had enough time go by that you're able to show that you have, spent down that money. And as soon as you have, then you can end your covered period anywhere between the 8 and the 24 weeks. If you're talking about self-employment, so you don't have other expenses, you just have your self-employment income, you can basically certify after the 8 weeks that you have used your funds, and you'd be eligible for the second draw. That's another good point, actually, because if this extension does go through, a lot of people that got the first draw since this Economic Aid Act passed may be eligible for the second draw, because now at least 8 weeks will have passed before the fund expires. So a lot of people that did apply for the first draw this time around did not have enough, would not have that 8 weeks before March 31st. So if that gets extended another couple of months, that's something for people to relook at again too.
Great, thank you, Rachel.
Sure.
And we did have another question, and it was to post the link to the SVOG webinar. And I know that Miguel did post that up there, so thank you. And we will be sure to provide that as well. Let's see, what other questions do we have? If you took the lower idle loan amount, can you submit a loan modification to get a higher loan amount?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What's going to happen, because this actually just came into effect, or it's going to be coming into effect next week. So April, I believe it's April 6th is the opening date to that new calculation. They are going to reach out by email to all of the existing borrowers. So if you already have an idle loan, you'll be getting probably 2 emails, one on the targeted advance if your loan was approved before December 27th. To see if you qualify for that additional money under that program. And then you'll also get a second email asking if you wanted to increase your loan amount, because the way it's being calculated is a lot different now. You're almost eligible for 4 times what you were eligible for the first time around. So both of those will be invitation only. So you should be getting emails from the Office of Disaster Assistance directly for those 2.
Thank you.
Sure.
Our next question is from Sarah Schaefer. What can you tell us about the restaurant revitalization grant that is expected to be available in April, she believes?
Yep, so another great question, and that came about through the American Rescue Plan that was just signed recently. That program, we don't have a definite date on when it's going to open yet, but that will be a grant program that anybody who serves food or beverage would be eligible to apply to the agency. We're not sure yet on when that's going to be open or what the application process is going to look like, but that will be direct assistance that's going to be available through the SBA. So it is, I believe, targeted to businesses that can show at least a 50% reduction in revenues based on 2019 to 2020. So just stay tuned on that. What I would suggest if you're in the restaurant industry is that you sign up for our email blast, as Miguel said, and then as soon as we have additional information, we're expecting next week to have some frequently asked questions and some more guidance around that program. And we send that out as quick as we can through our email blast system.
About that. Okay, our next question is, how do you find out if you qualify for the idle advance as a low income area? Is there a list somewhere?
Yep, good question too. Lots of good questions. So basically you would get an email inviting you to apply for the program. Again, you have to have already applied for the idle loan before December 27th of 2020. So there's nothing you can, submit now, but you'll get an email and it will have a mapping tool in there. So you can quickly click on the link and put in your address, and it should tell you whether you're in a qualified area or not. And then if you meet that criteria, then you can move forward if you can show that you have that 30% reduction in revenue. So it will require you to do an online application after that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sure.
I don't see any other questions out there in the chat unless anyone wants to submit any. I don't see any others, so I'm going to turn this right over to Allison from the Falls Chamber. Allison.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you so much to Rachel Roderick and Miguel Morales from the SBA New Hampshire District Office of the Small Business Administration. All the information today was great. We hope that all the attendees were able to enhance their understanding of the federal programs available to help get their businesses through this final stretch of the pandemic. Everyone registered for today's event will receive a link with the video recording to the event. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues, my tri-chamber colleagues at the Greater Dover Chamber of Commerce and Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce for collaborating to bring this presentation together today. Thank you, everyone, and take care.